All right, so today we're going to talk about centering, and the first thing we want to do is get our body so that it's in a good position so that we can use leverage over strength. That's the key factor in this process. So I want to feel that if I put my arms on my thighs and I'm relaxed, my arms are naturally going to fall right here. All right, and the other thing I want is for my butt to be behind my shoulders so that I should feel a slight lean and about a 45-degree angle in relationship to the clay or the wheel. So thighs need to be parallel to the ground, whether you put your feet on the stool or on bricks, it's up to you. But you want a posture that looks somewhat like this. You want your body to feel like it's putting weight on top of your elbows, which are on top of your thighs, and that your arms are creating like an L. And then from this position, you should just be relaxed and be able to put your hands on the clay like so. All right, so we're going to start centering. The first thing I would do is just put a tiny or thin film of water on your bat. The more even this cone is, the better this is going to feel, and the easier it'll be to center. So put it down with some force. And if you need to shift it or pat it into a more even shape, then do that. Our speed is going to be pretty fast. Maybe not 100%, but about 75% full speed. And what I want is my hands to really fall in this position. The idea that I want you to think about is that we're going to compress the clay. We're not trying to lift the clay, we just want to create a compression from two sides. So the idea is that my hands are going to do this, and the clay is going to move naturally through my hands. So it'll look a little bit like this. One hand is going to feel like it's going to push, and the other hand is going to feel like it's going to bring the clay back towards me. So what I'm doing, okay, is I am going to create a little bit of force with this hand against my left. And you can see that the clay is coming up a little taller. As the clay moves up, my hands move. And it's more of a glide with compression than a feeling of lifting. Okay? So at the bottom, you're going to need to wait a few seconds for the clay to start moving. Then your hands need to move pretty quickly. Once you get to the top, you pause and release gently. Okay? To bring it down, you want one hand on top. You want the tip of the clay to be right under your thumb pad. Okay? That edge of the clay is going to be right about where your lifeline is. And the idea here is that my opposite hand, in this case my right hand, is going to support the clay. So I'm going to put that hand about an inch or so below the top. And then all I'm going to do here is lean forward. I'm going to push the clay with my body. And as the clay is being shifted, it'll naturally start to come down. So the pressure here is at an angle, not flattening the clay. Alright, so we'll do it one more time. It doesn't matter whether it's your left hand that pushes or your right hand that pushes. What you want is to create compression against the clay. So here I'm going to do it with my left hand pushing. My thumbs are up and out of the way, always. And you can see that the clay is in the palm or pocket of my hand. My fingers are not active. The only thing my fingers do is help me keep a connection with my hands. But the pressure is something like this, like if you're trying to crack an acorn or something with your hands. A few seconds at the bottom so that the clay here gets compressed, and then slide your hands up. release gently. You don't need to bring it up very tall. So from this position, top of the clay, right here, like we talked about, under the thumb pad, this hand about an inch lower, and then we're gonna lean into it a little bit. Maybe make it go down about halfway or a third of the way. Move your hands down, hold, release, and do it again. A little bit of pressure gradually. The clay reacts. Let your hands follow the clay. And then bring it down a little bit more so that you have a dome-like form. And this, you can see that it's centered. It's not wobbly or anything. All right, so now that we have the clay centered, we're going to open it. Same speed. This is going to be a pretty quick speed. And what I want is for my hands to really work in this pie. So between 3 and 6 o'clock. The other thing that's really important is I only want to work on the southern hemisphere. So my hands, my fingers, nothing should ever go north of center. My hands, as much as I can put them together, the better. So I want one hand to support the other. And again, this is not about force or tension. This is really about leverage and using our body effectively. So my hands are together so that they can support each other. My fingers will support each other. And I'm going to use my middle finger as a guide to find the center. So that finger right now is touching the center. And it's going down center. In other words, my finger is not wobbly or doing something odd here. Okay? It's almost stationary. And all I want to do is use my body to create a bit of force down into the center. So I want to feel like my shoulder, my back, my forearm is what's creating the force rather than my fingers. My fingers are really just trying to work as a single unit and trying to stay as relaxed as possible. So I'm going to create an opening, and then from there, I'm going to move my arm back. So if I'm going to bring my elbow back towards my hip, and what that will do is it'll make it easy to move that clay. Okay? When I get to the open, right, the wide part, my hands have no pressure. I'm going to release. And then from here, I'm going to roll my fingers back to center. Go a little deeper, and then repeat that process. What I'm using to bring the clay back to me is my arm more than anything else. It's not my fingers. Okay? Notice that my hand is pretty level to my forearm. So in other words, I don't have exaggerated angles. The only thing that may change is the position of my fingers. If I want to create a curve, then I'm going to use the curve of my fingers to create a curve inside. So the curve of my hand is almost like a template. It has a curve. The other thing is, if I want to create a more flat bottom, then I'm going to let my fingers curl a little bit more so that the opening is more flat. We'll talk about that at another point. This just has to do with the shape that I'm going to make going forward. It's important here to keep the rim from getting thin. The other thing I want to do is, like, when I open this, I want to create a wall thickness that I consider to be reasonable. So this is about an inch or a little bit more than an inch. This is reasonable for me because when I go to stretch the clay, throw, I am not going to need to put a lot of force. So everything that we're doing is really focused on trying to use very minimal force. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I have not used more force than about a 3 to do all of this. So the more relaxed you are, the more you use your leverage and your large muscles, the easier all of this will be. So now that we have the clay open, we're gonna stretch it, we're gonna throw. So this is called throwing. What I wanna do is slow my speed down to about half of centering speed, and it's gonna be something around here, maybe half of the pedal speed. I want my fingers, I want a pressure point to be on the inside, like around 4 or 5 o'clock, and on the outside, exactly opposite. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue to try to keep my hand together. And I recommend putting a sponge in your hand. Any sponge is fine, kind of like this. So that when you softly close your hand, it's going to keep your hand in this position. The force of my hand is coming more from my body. So in other words, I'm going to use my shoulder and my forearm to create the pressure rather than using my fingers. So I don't want tension on my fingers, and I don't want my fingers to extend or separate from each other. So I want this relationship as much as possible. When I'm putting pressure and I'm actually moving my hands, it's okay to let the clay move around here. All right, you want to be relaxed so that that can happen naturally. But I want the position of my hand to stay as much like this as possible. So it'll look a little bit like this. I'm going to allow my hands to make a connection, whichever way is comfortable for you. I'm going to start by putting a little bit of pressure with my outside hand, and my pressure is focused right here on the very bottom. And I want to feel that my pressure is going in, right, and down. So almost as if I were trying to put my finger through the bat. So that's going to make the clay stand up a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure with my inside hand, and then my hands are going to come up together. As I get close to the top, my pressure is going to be reduced to 0. Hold for a few seconds and release. The most important thing here is that your hands are relaxed and that you allow your elbows as much as possible to stay connected to your thighs. Your hands move in rhythm with the clay. So the clay is not moving very fast. Okay? So my hands are not going to travel very fast. A few seconds at the bottom to create a compression, and then move up slowly. No pressure. Hold. 1, 2, 3. And let go. You should see the rings be fairly even with each other. So we're going to finish making the bowl. So we're going to stretch it out a little bit more and refine the form overall so that it just needs a little bit of trimming. So what I'm going to do is keep my hands in the same position as much as possible. Height is the first thing that I want to achieve. So what I'm focusing on right now is the overall height of the form. I'm going to open it, but if I open too early, I'm going to lose its stand-up strength. So what I'm really focusing on right now is making the form about half completed. So I would say this is about half completed. I have the overall height that I want. The clay is still thick enough that I can stretch it, so it's a little thicker than about 1/4 of an inch. And then what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to let my inside hand dominate. So your inside hand is the one that's most responsible for the form. The outside hand is really more of a compression hand. So what I'm going to do is have my hands in the same position, but instead of having my right hand dominate, my inside hand is the one that's going to dominate. So I'm going to feel like my inside hand is almost drawing the form. So most of the pressure is going to come from the inside, and my outside hand is simply going to support. And what that does is open the form. There's still almost no pressure at the very top. So most of the pressure is happening here. Okay? And that, putting pressure more on the bottom, will automatically create a more open top. You can leave your hand marks, that's completely up to you. If you want to change them, the wooden rib is really the best tool. I'm going to refine this part here, get a little bit of an undercut. This is going to help me to have a guide for the wire. So here, all I'm going to do is put this at a little bit of a flat angle. I don't want to approach it like this, so it's going to be almost flat. Create a little bit of pressure with the inside and move my hands up. The speed of your hands is going to give you a reflection of rhythm on the outside. So now I would say that this bowl is pretty much done. Remove any sitting water. Deal with your rim. All I'm doing here is putting a tiny bit of pressure on the rim. I'm holding it, in other words, supporting the rim between my thumb and index finger, and then I'm just letting my sponge or another little tool sort of cradle, almost like if it was a saddle on a horse's back. And there's almost no pressure there. There's like zero pressure. I'm not feeling anything. That's going to give you a strong rim. And so the last thing we're going to do is slow the wheel down a little bit. And then from here, I want a lot of tension in my hands. I want my thumbs down, and all I'm focusing on is keeping this super tight and keeping my thumbs against the wheel head. And then slowly bring it all the way through.